Okay, welcome everybody. This is TV Skywriter, and I'm Pat Murray, your host. I'm real excited to say that although most of my shows, in fact all of my shows, I've spoken to fellow Americans, so to speak, this is my first international show where my guest is from Great Britain. He's a writer. His name is Steven Hawley. Welcome to the show, Mr. Hawley.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Wait, I have something for you. Wait. In honor of the fact that you're from Great Britain, Jammy Dodgers.
Jammy Dodgers. My other half is upstairs.
I'm a big fan of Doctor Who. Thought I'd let you know that. But you are, like me, you're an aspiring writer. I thought we'd talk about writing a little bit. You sent me your story called Cattle Market, and I totally enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
I'm just saying that because you have to be polite, right?
No, I really liked it. But I'll tell you why I liked it. Okay, here's why I liked it so much. It's a good story, but what I really enjoyed about reading the story was that you had details in there that only a person who was in the business of caregiving would know. And I like to read stories where there's a certain level of expertise. And I really enjoyed how the story moved. Tell us a little bit about the story.
The Cattle Market follows the career of a man who starts in English care at 1960 when institutes were still sort of prevalent. And it just follows his career through sort of 1960 up until current day, 2014, and just sort of monitors the changes that British care has gone through. I don't know if you're aware, but we've actually had quite a lot of scandals recently because our care homes are pretty appalling. There's a lot of abuse and neglect and that sort of thing. So yeah, I've seen quite a few things in my time. I've been in care for about 9 years, and some of the things I've seen, not quite as horrific as what is described in Cattle Market. For instance, I haven't seen a murder. However, I have been told stories of murders should I say, where basically neglect has caused the death. Caused the death of a client, so to speak. And I've seen some things myself where I just thought, oh, this is pretty shocking. And being young and inexperienced, I didn't really know how to sort of handle it. So having grown up a little bit and become a bit more cynical in the trade, I thought the best way to do that was to note down a few of my experiences on paper.
Okay. Now, for those of us now here in the USA, we might not be familiar with the term care the way you're using it. I'm envisioning like an elderly care facility. That's what I was envisioning.
Yeah, we have a couple of things. We've got something called a care home, which is what you might consider sort of an elderly care facility, where you'd have sort of 30 upwards sort of clients, we call them, I suppose patients, whatever, I don't know what term you'd use. And you'd have sort of minimal staff looking after them, and basically their life in a care home is pretty dull. Not a lot happens, they just sort of sit watching TV all day long. But we also have something here called supported living, which is what I'm currently working in, which is a much better field. That's more sort of supporting individuals to be themselves, to do what they want to do, is sort of pro-choice and all the rest of it, and out in the community, getting them out and about. So it's a lot more sort of enlightened, I suppose, way of dealing with care. But there's still a lot of care homes out there, and all the scandals that are happening at the moment in the newspapers are all to do with care homes rather than supported living.
So actually, with your writing about some of the things that you've seen, have you created any bit of a sensation or a little stir in your community in bringing these facts to your neighbors' attention?
I could not cause as much of a stir as what's currently happening in the trade and being brought to light. We have something called BBC Panorama. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
And they often go... well, essentially what they do is they have an undercover reporter who takes a job in a care home and has like little button cams, and they'll sort of record what goes on, and the stir that's caused, nothing I could write could compete with what BBC Panorama have managed to do. I had hoped it would sort of raise levels of awareness. I'm not saying it's like all doom and gloom. I mean, there is good practices out there, but you know, when it goes wrong, it's really wrong. And I had hoped to sort of raise awareness.
So, because we're talking about older people, do they often not have family looking out for them?
It depends. You do get. Uh, when I worked in a care home, you did have one or two people who had family come and visit, but generally, I don't know what it's like over there, but the care homes I worked in, when you end up in a care home, that's generally because you want to be forgotten about by your family.
Oh my
Sounds
God.
yeah,
Oh,
that's not every case. Do you know what I mean? There's
yeah, yeah.
sort of 60. It's more than average cases. It's a case of they've got to the point where they can't look after themselves. The family aren't really bothered, and the only time they really turn up to deal with their family members is end of life. You know, when there's a will to be fought over, I suppose. But saying that, there is another side to the coin as well. There are some really supportive families. I mean, at the moment, we've got families coming in all the time to visit their loved ones, and it's a really nice change from working where I've worked before.
That's good.
But
That's good.
like I said before, I don't want to sort of say, oh, care homes are rubbish, but there are sort of good stories as well. But with cattle market, I focus more on the negativity.
Hmm. But even in this country, it's true. I have to say, people have told me this. I take it that it's true. That if you do have family or someone coming to visit you, you get better care because the staff then knows somebody is paying attention.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
very
keeps it.
often, it would be the person who's totally alone in the world who would probably be treated with a certain amount of, I'd say, negligence. And
Yeah, no,
it's really sad. It's really sad.
you're spot on. I work with a colleague at the minute. She won't mind me saying it, but her dad was in a care home, and she used to go and visit all the time. And she'd go in, and a couple of times he'd have sort of food down his front and on his face and things where people hadn't wiped up after his meal, and she'd sort of go out and kick ass basically and make sure the staff were on their toes, so they always knew when she was due for a visit, and generally he was well presented. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but the thing Panorama sort of pointed out was, if nobody's really sort of watching, then there is a tendency to sort of slip into bad habits when because care homes are generally short-staffed. You've got sort of 40 clients and maybe 4 or 5 staff members that have to sort of do the morning routine, do the afternoon routine,
Hmm.
do the evening routine. So it's not just the staff that are at fault. There is a lot of, I don't know, just poor staffing, poor management sometimes. And once again,
That
focus
happens
on the
here too.
negativity.
Yeah, that
Eh?
happens here too. Not enough workers, and they're not paid a lot either.
Yeah, no. Actually, supported living, you generally get a higher rate of pay here, but in care homes that's minimum wage best, which is about £6.78 or something. I forget what it is now.
Yeah.
But it's not for the level of trust you're given, looking after like a life basically for
Sure.
£6 whatever. You're not going to be interested in your job. I mean, that's sort of stacking shelves wages, and people just sort of stick their earphones in, and they're not bothered about what's going on. They're just doing their job. Do you know what I mean? And when you get paid sort of lower rates, that's all you're interested in doing, just getting your job done and going home at the end of the day. Um,
That makes sense. Yeah.
but
So is that why you started writing, or were you writing stories before?
um, yeah, no, I've always wanted to write, but I don't want to be employed for the rest of my life. My ideal job's professional unemployment. Do you know what I mean? And I
Hmm.
thought might as well take a hobby that I've got and hopefully make something out of it, because there's no career in care really.
Hmm.
It's a nowhere job, and you get out of it what you put in. And some people just don't put anything in, and some people put their all in. So
Hmm. So as far as your writing, though, is this something that you find escape in? Is it considered a very serious hobby that you invest in and or invest a lot of time in, or is it just something you just do every now and
I,
again?
I don't invest as much time as I probably like. I would like to spend all my free time writing, but I procrastinate quite a bit. But when I do write, I take myself quite seriously. I've always taken my writing quite seriously, but obviously my skills grown over time, and I had a lot of confidence in my ability when it wasn't there, if that makes sense. So I've spent a lot of time just basically getting my skill level up to a point where I can actually present a piece of material and be proud of it. Um, but yeah, no, I'd like to spend all my free time writing, but I don't, because I'm lazy.
Now, when you were a boy, what kind of books did you like to read?
I didn't actually, here's a confession, didn't really learn to read properly until I was in my late teens. I could always read, but I'd never picked up a book and sat and read for fun. It was always something I was forced to do through
Mm-hmm.
school. You know, my family are big readers, and it's not something I really sort of took to. And it sort of a short bit like Harry Potter, for example, was probably the first book I actually read from cover to back sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that took me about 2 months to read because that's how poor my ability was. But since then, obviously, I've got a collection of books that I quite enjoy reading. I've got a couple of favourite authors. So.
So do you prefer reading adventure, biographies, science fiction?
Fantasy and science fiction is what I generally read. Richard Morgan is one of my favourite sci-fi authors, and Terry Pratchett, obviously, he's my favourite fantasy author. I've read a few others as well, like Eragon and all the rest of it.
Now, when I was a kid, I liked science fiction, or what I think was called science fiction. My favorite writer in that genre was Ray Bradbury, because even though the stories might have been fanciful, the details within the stories were very real, and I really enjoyed that.
Okay, I've not heard of him. What sort of stories does he write?
Well, the movie that's probably best known from one of his stories is probably Fahrenheit 451.
Okay.
And that is where reading became sort of illegal. Books were illegal in the future.
Okay.
And it's about some renegades who are interested in reading, and the government doesn't want them to read. You know, it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, that sounds quite good.
Very exciting. So, and actually, when I was a kid, actually, I read a lot of his short stories. I don't know, it seems that he wrote more short stories than full novels. I might be wrong about that. And to tell you the truth, as an adult, I haven't read much in terms of fiction and science fiction and whatnot. It seems that as an adult, I tend to read for information. They say that happens a lot. You get up to a certain age, and then you're just looking for information, to improve your life or whatever. And as an adult, I think the only fiction I really have read has been Georges Simenon. He was a Belgian writer. He wrote turn of the 20th century. He had a series that I loved called Maigret, and that was a police chief in turn of the century Paris. And the reason why I liked those stories is because there's no car chases, no excitement. It was all like a raised eyebrow or a whiff of perfume or something that would set the detective off on finding the clues to solve the mystery. And I really enjoyed those stories. I wish I could write like that, but that calls for a certain level of writing that I don't seem to have just yet.
You just keep trying. I haven't actually. I don't think I've read anything you've written, so you'll have to send me something.
Okay, I will. I actually, well, I guess I could say I'm published, but only as a newspaper publisher. I do a monthly newspaper called the Durham Skywriter, which is online. But as far as fiction, I haven't really shared anything with too many people. I'll send you something.
Okay, that would be nice. Thanks.
But what's your routine? Because you do have family life, and you do have a job. So where and when do you write?
I hope my boss doesn't watch this video because I do a lot of waking night shifts, and I tend to sneak my laptop in and write when I'm doing a night shift. There's not a lot happens. There's not 40 guys where I work. There's 6. So they generally have a sound night's sleep, and there's not much else to do. So
Well, if everybody's asleep, sure, you should do your writing then, right?
Well, I can't see the harm in it. I generally take a notepad rather than a laptop because there's the ethical problem of stealing their electricity if you plug your laptop in if it runs out of power. So once the battery's gone, it's notepad time, right? But yeah, most of my writing's done when I get a minute, and most of my free time is at work, funnily enough.
Are you working on a full-length novel right now, or do you still prefer to write short stories?
I'm working on short stories at the moment, just as I say, just to get my skill level up a little bit more, get the practice in. but I have got a project in the pipeline. I've actually booked all of July off to work on it. So I've got a whole month where it's kind of my own little NaNoWriMo event. So in
Yeah.
July I'm going to sort of spend the whole month just writing away. So I thought I'd pick a nice month where the weather's nice. It's sci-fi I'm working on this time.
Okay. Now, where is your story Cattle Market available? Because when you sent it to me, I read it, and I'm really surprised that you're telling me that you didn't really read well until now, because you're a really good writer.
Thank you. It's available on Amazon. You can get it on there. I'm tied into a contract with them at the minute, so once that runs out, it'll probably be available on the other e-readers that you can purchase these days.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, because you did mention something about Amazon singles. Is that what it is? And what is Amazon singles?
Amazon Singles is a thing they're doing at the moment where they are. You have your normal Amazon publishing where you can download your books and all the rest of it onto your Kindle, but they also have now singles where on your Kindle you can search for short stories, short novels, and it's dedicated for the short fiction form. And it's the idea behind it is just to sort of give more publicity to people who are sort of prolific short story authors. And it has a submission process, which, like with Amazon, when you publish on Amazon, if you've written a novel or something, you decide to self-publish, you can sort of upload it yourself, and there's nothing more to it. Well, it's a bit more complicated, but you just upload it. There's no sort of submission. There's no approval of anybody saying, yeah, it's a good story, we'll accept that. But with Amazon Singles, you actually have to submit it to their editors, and they decide whether or not it's something they want to include in their singles market. I submitted Cattle Market to Amazon Singles and it got declined, so that's why I've actually self-published it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I'm not letting that get me down. I'm working on another short story at the minute, which I hope to break through with Amazon Singles. That's my goal for this year, to get something on Amazon Singles.
I like the idea. I'm assuming that it's a good way to discover new writers. Although, well, you tell me this. Do you think most writers are able to write both short stories and full-length novels, or do you think the skill set is different?
It's different, not dissimilar, but it is different. With a short story, you generally focus on maybe 2 or 3 characters, depending on the length. Sometimes it's only one character. Your subplots are short and sweet because you don't have a great deal of time to sort of expand upon any thoughts or ideas you have. It depends how short you want to keep the story. Whereas with a novel, you can sort of go off on a complete tangent for a little while, as long as obviously it contributes to the story itself, and then come back to your main sort of storyline. And it's a different. You have to get your mind around various plot holes and that sort of thing. You can generally write yourself into corner. I found when I've attempted a full-length novel, I'll sort of get to a point where I think, right, I've just written myself into corner because I've got my storyline coming up to a point. I've included this subplot, which has now completely ruined this storyline, and this subplot's taken over the story, and that becomes the actual story. So then I completely destroyed the original plot line and focus more on the subplot becoming the main story, and then I just get myself into a right angle. So there is definitely a difference in writing a short story to a full length.
I see. Well, a good way to learn about the craft of writing is online. We actually did meet in a writers forum that is called writingforums.com. And to me, as a person who did not major in literature or creative writing, it's a really good way to get tips on writing and the publishing world.
Yeah, no, I actually, a lot of what I learned in writing, I learned from those forums. I think I mentioned that the first thing I ever wrote, it was really, the storyline I think is actually still salvageable, but the writing itself was really diabolically bad. I didn't know how to punctuate, I didn't know how to spell even. My paragraphs were non-existent. Basically, my paragraph would start when a whole new scene started. Before then, you know, my dialogue tags were on the same line, so it was just a big.
No.
But I was really proud of it. Thought it was the best thing ever. You know, expecting to get a publishing deal out of it. But then I joined the forums and realised when I posted it, we had a member unfortunately We think he's actually passed on now, but there was a member gave me really good feedback on it, and it gave me a wake-up call that actually I have to really learn what I'm doing here. And a lot of what I've learned has been from these forums.
And actually, I don't know about other writing forums, but this particular one, writingforums.com, it seems that most people are pretty nice. I don't think they really allow people to jump on each other. It happens in other forums that I've visited. I don't mean writing forums, but just different types of forums. Sometimes people, their meanness will come out, but that's not really an evidence at writingforums.com. I'm throwing out a plug, I admit it. I think it's a good forum. I think there's a lot of really knowledgeable people there, people who have self-published and people who have had their books, what do you call it, trade published, or traditional, as some people call it.
Traditionally published, yeah.
So I invite people to visit. I am Pat Skywriter on writingforums.com. So I don't know if you want to give away your handle, just do you want to?
The infamous Potty.
Potty, Potty.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you so much, Steven, for coming on TV Skywriter and being really brave. It takes a lot to be on an international internet show, so I really appreciate your agreeing to come on.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. So if you're a writer, musician, entrepreneur, or otherwise interesting person, and you want to be on TV Skywriter, just write to me at durhamskywriter@gmail.com. If you want to see what an all-positive community newspaper looks like, just check it out, durhamskywriter.com. It emanates from Durham, North Carolina, here in the USA. And with that, thank you. Oh, I wanted to point out one thing, Steven, that I cannot believe that you live just outside Stratford-Upon-Avon, which is Shakespeare's hometown.
Sorry, who?
Shakespeare.
Yes.
Oh, I just think that is unbelievable.
Yeah. No, it's just up the road from me. It's about 15 miles away. So.
Okay. I've never been to England. I don't know if I'll ever get to go, but can you give us, before we go, just kind of like a description of where you live? I've seen London, of course, on Doctor Who, but I've also seen some smaller towns that look really cute. I'm wondering, what does your town look like?
I live in a village rather than a town, sort of thatched cottages, farmland all around. There's not a village shop for miles, which sucks. But it's really picturesque, really peaceful. It's really nice. You get deer sort of coming across your back garden in the mornings, and it's a really nice place to live.
So everybody's into gardening, I take it? I just get the sense that everybody in England has a garden.
Yeah, well, some say they're into gardening, but they're not. They're into barbecues when the sun eventually comes out.
That's good too.
My other half, actually, she's big time into gardening. She's studying horticulture at the moment. So.
Nice. Okay. Well, thanks again, Steven, for being on the show.
Thank you.
And again, I'm hoping to hear from the rest of you who want to be guests on TV Skywriter. Like I said, write to durhamskywriter@gmail.com. With that, I say cheers.
See ya.
See you later.